Oh, thanks. I just got a message from one of the support team. We are recording. Thank you very much, Katie. So the intention of this webinar, I'm not, a lot of the times you jump on these things and you see that at the end of it, there's a big sell. There's a, hey, it's been a great webinar. If you really want to, get these benefits we're talking about, buy this. That's not happening today. So I'm not at the end of this going to come up with some big pitch. So I really want you to relax. I'm here to educate you today. I want to talk about information that I have personally found valuable in my life. So I'm here to share that with you. I'm also here to make sure that I answer your questions. So for those of you that did send questions through via email, I appreciate that. I know that not all of you were able to be on this event live today, so I will get to those questions. And if you have any further questions after this webinar, please email me. I'd really like to be able to answer this for you, okay? So if anything, at the end of this webinar, what you might want to do is you might want to have a coffee and have a bit of a conversation about your personal situation. If you do, great, get in touch with us. That's it. The rest of the time we're on this call today, I want to make sure I'm answering questions, providing value, and giving you some information that you can go and implement today. Okay? All right. So this leads me to where we are today. I mean, the webinar is about personal freedom. I'm going to talk about what personal freedom is and also what it isn't, because a lot of people seem to think that personal freedom is just about, your ability to just do whatever you want. They think it's about being able to tell the police or authority that, you don't have to abide by any of the agreements that are in place with society. So that's not personal freedom to me. I'm going to ask you to look at a few subtle topics today that if you don't really look for the subtle differences in these topics, then you're probably going to miss the point of what we're talking about. So my attitude towards it is that in life, we don't look to make great, big, huge, massive, drastic changes in order to change an outcome. So in your life, you're aiming a bow and arrow, and you're aiming at a target that's 100 or 150 meters down the road. Well, your arrow is effectively, and this is an assumption on my part, but if you're on this call, it tells me that your arrow is actually hitting the target. Your arrow is not just dropping on the floor in front of you, 5 meters away from where you shot it. So your arrow flies through the air, it hits the target, but is it hitting the bullseye? And if you're like me, and particularly where I was 10 and 15 years ago, the arrow was flying through the air and hitting the target, but it wasn't hitting the bullseye. And just like in any major sporting event, second place, there's a pretty big difference in what you get and what you achieve compared to the person who wins the bullseye and hits first place. The differences are subtle. And so in everything we talk about, in all the services we supply via Advanced Business Abilities, it is about the subtle differences in actions and inaction, the subtle differences in things that you say or don't say, the ways that you say them or don't say them. Those are the things that make an impact in our life. Now, albeit it's subtle, but if you take that subtle difference and extend it out over time and distance, the difference it makes is enormous. So listen and look for the subtle today. So first step, what is personal freedom? So personal freedom to me is the ability to get what you want in your life and the ability to create what you want. So that applies to life, business. It doesn't matter what arena you're playing in. So I'm going to explain a bit more about that by really just telling a story. And that story is, well, how was Advanced Business Abilities created? So it does apply. I trust that this will be valuable and interesting for you. I started a business when I was 21. And at the time, I was certain that by the time I was 30, I would be retired and sipping margaritas on a beach in Waikiki or somewhere like that. What happened for me was the closer I got to 30, the further away this concept of retirement became. I found that it was actually a lot harder than I ever thought it would be. And I also found that the older I got, the less I thought I knew. So over the period of running that business, I hired lots of coaches to assist me. I wanted to develop myself. I wanted to learn. I wanted to understand how to run my business more efficiently, particularly as I went further down the process and realized that I didn't know what I was doing as much as I thought I did. So, I hire these coaches and read lots of books, and this all explains the same concepts to me, which fundamentally is that I create my own reality. And none of them actually went through, well, this is the way that you create your own reality. These are the processes. These are the principles that apply. So if you have this reality right now, that means that you've been doing this, 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 and this. And if you'd like a different reality, if you've got A and you want to create D, then do this, 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 and this, and that's going to change what you're actually getting. None of the books and none of the coaches that I worked with were able to give me that system laid out, a series of steps, a matrix, if you want, or I suppose a structure in order to approach things with. I found that all of the information about how to run a business was available for free online. All of the information about, how to run and create a startup, or everything you wanted to know was online. But it wasn't the problem. The problem wasn't, well, how do I do this? The problem was that I didn't feel able to do it. I felt restricted. I didn't feel free. See, successful people have something in common. And the thing that they have in common is that they are unrestricted. They feel free, and they are free to be able to be or do or have, experience or create whatever they'd like to. So they get an idea and they go and take action on it. That's a big difference. Whereas, what happened for me and what I've seen happen for lots of other people is we get a great idea, but then all of a sudden we're not able to just go and take action on it. We somehow enter the doubt factory, or we all of a sudden see all of the reasons that it's not going to work, or we feel like there's a wall in front of us, and I felt like I wasn't able to get over or around or under that wall. I didn't know where to go. So I think I know a lot of people relate to that. The fundamental thing for me was that I wanted more in my life. I wanted to be more able. I didn't want to feel the stresses and the uncertainty, and I wasn't feeling okay, but I didn't understand the reason that I wasn't feeling okay. So I've just realized I haven't checked the chat box at all. Yep, good, everybody's going great. If you have a question, just make sure you pop it straight into the chat box there for me so that I know I've got my eye on that now. So I thought there was something wrong with me. I ran that business for 10 years, and in running it, I had some really high highs, and at the same time, when the lows hit, they were really low. and to say that I didn't feel okay, definitely at points was an understatement. And again, I didn't understand what was causing that. When you look in the mirror and you're unsure, uncertain, and unclear about where you're going wrong, it's really difficult to actually correct that, because if you don't have that, then there's no clarity to see exactly what was the error. So I really understand what it feels like to think that I have more potential than what I'm currently showing the world. And I've found over the last 11 years of working with people one-on-one, that's a really common feeling. I raise that because, again, I felt there was something wrong with me. How was it that I wasn't able to effortlessly make decisions? How was it that I wasn't able to just work and produce a result and get where I wanted to get to? Have you ever had the experience of, it kind of feels like I've gone to the airport, I'm certain that I'm getting on a plane and I'm heading to Sydney. I've set my goal, I've created a plan, and I'm on my way to go and achieve what I want to achieve. And so I go to the airport, I get on the plane, and The plane takes off. I've boarded the plane. My ticket says Sydney. I've got on the plane that says it's going to Sydney. We fly, we land, and I get off the plane and ended up in Darwin. That was the experience for me. I was certain retirement by 30. And yet I got on the plane, I worked really hard, I put in lots of effort, and at 30, I was nowhere near Sydney. I was in Darwin, and I didn't really understand how I got there. So I'm going to talk today a little bit about how that works. And fundamentally, in order to understand personal freedom, the thing that's really important to understand is, well, what gets in the way of personal freedom? What stops us? What restricts us from being able to be, do, have, experience, or get what we want? So if you have an idea on that, pop it in the chat box now. For me, it took me a long time to understand that. You know, the general trend of things is that, you know, people talk about it's just about making sure you can see the steps and understand how. Well, that's only part of it. Personal freedom means that you can literally get what you want. So if you can't get what you want, well, there's a reason for that. And for a long time, I didn't have something, I didn't have a way that I could talk about that or explain what that was. What I've come to do now, or the way that I've come to talk about it now, is that the thing that gets in the way is something I've now called emotional charge. So if we want to talk about personal freedom, it's pretty important to understand what emotional charge is, and how does emotional charge restrict us, and how does emotional charge get created? Like, what is it? So, so if we look at that, fundamentally, emotional charge is created when we have moments where we are unwilling to experience something. So, simple example is, you know, you're at school and you're daydreaming out the window, and all of a sudden you can hear the teacher at the front of the room talk, and all of a sudden the room goes silent. Next thing you know, there's a rap on your desk, and the teacher calls out your name and says, "Right, what's the answer?" So if you're 12 years old and you're back at school first day after your summer holidays, and you have that experience, that doesn't feel very nice. You tend to feel stupid, you feel pressured, or your mates are looking at you, you feel silly, you're uncertain and unclear, and you're embarrassed. Now, the challenge with all of that is that all of those feelings are feelings that many people, majority of people, are very unwilling to experience. We don't like feeling that way. So the moment that that occurs, it's a moment where we're unwilling to experience something. In that moment, immediately, charge is created. Emotional charge is created. Now, emotional charge is a bit like a virus on a file in your computer. So if you've got a computer and a file on your computer has a virus attached to it, what happens? That virus tends to spread. It starts to impact the entire hard drive. It'll go and attach itself to every file. It'll go into your email systems. It slows the whole thing down. Emotional charge does the same thing for us in terms of the way we think. You know, your computer is a processor. Well, you've got one of those as well. And that processor, if it gets slowed down, that processor is going to impact you. So, therefore, we have these moments where we are unwilling to experience something. And in that moment, emotional charge is created. Sorry, my phone just went off, so I'm just turning it to silent. There we go. So in that moment, emotional charge is created. When emotional charge is created, it now sits like a file on the hard drive of the computer with a virus attached. It begins to impact all of the things that we create in our life. So you've got a moment where this happened in maths class. So what will then happen is over the next month, 2, 3, 6 months, you will create more moments like that having to do with maths class. So after the first time it occurs, you leave maths class and you go, I wish I was still on summer holidays. But the next time it happens, emotional charge compounds on itself. So next time it happens, you walk out of maths class going, I don't much like this subject of, addition and subtraction. Or maybe at 12 years old, you're starting to learn the next level of mathematics, but you'll walk out going, I didn't much enjoy that. Fast forward, and over the next few years, you've created more moments like this on the subject of maths class. And, after the 10th time, you walk out going, I don't much like this teacher. And then the 15th time you walk out and you're thinking to yourself, bloody hell, maths, man, I really don't like maths. 20th time you walk out and you get to a point called, right, that's it, I hate maths. In fact, I'm sure that the subject of maths has it out for me. Trigonometry, no, it can go to hell. And that's it. From then on, you have this firm, stern attitude towards maths. Now, it could be towards maths, it could be towards English, it could be towards anything where you have had something that you're unwilling to experience. So the two of the main things I want to make sure that I get across to you in this webinar today is that there are two things that will determine your ability to get what you want in your life, more than any other two things. And those two things are, number one, your willingness to experience. The reason for that is because charge is created when we have moments where we are unwilling to experience something. So therefore, our willingness to experience is going to determine how much charge we create, how much new charge we create and get on board. I trust that makes sense. If that in any way doesn't make sense, make sure you email me or send a message or stick something in the chat box now. Even if you're watching a replay of this, if you put something in the chat box, it's going to email me and I'll come back to you, okay? So, willingness to experience. That's the very first thing. The second thing is willingness to confront. So, let's just give that a definition, because for a lot of people, the word confront tends to have a really negative or oppositional definition. It has a negative connotation. For many people, to confront means to butt heads, or to poke and prod, to have an intention to upset. That's not the definition that I'm using for that word. So there's another definition for that word, which is essentially your ability to face and deal with ease. And that's what I'm referring to. Your willingness to confront really is your willingness to see something as it is. Your willingness to deal with something without dropping into heaps of emotion. Your ability to confront, see it as it is, with ease. Does that make sense? If not, make sure that you message through. So we have these two things, this willingness to experience and willingness to confront. Now, you can also, I think you'll be able to see that if you have a low willingness to experience, what happens to your willingness to confront something? It's automatically less, because you're going to be stuck in emotion. You're not going to be effortlessly standing in that position as an observer, right? I'm aware right now that I've made an assumption. One of the assumptions I've made is that if you're attending this webinar, if you're watching a replay, that you have already downloaded and received the document that we've got available for free on our site called, it's called How to Reclaim Your Personal Authority. And that's really all about how to get more personal freedom for yourself. And in that document, we reveal 5 of the key things that you can implement in your life right now. Theoretically, you can read that and go and do it right now. These 5 things are 5 areas that if you implement a way of approaching life, you're going to reduce the level of unwillingness to experience you have. The thing is, to do that, it requires an amount of willingness to confront. Willingness to confront can feel uneasy. There can be degrees of discomfort in it. if you're at work and there's a problem with one of your colleagues, it's much easier to attempt to ignore the problem or to attempt to skirt around it, or make up for it or justify for the person's behavior. Or it can be much easier, or it can seem much easier to do that than it is to confront the person. Unfortunately, it's not easier. In fact, it actually creates more complications. So one of the things that we talk about quite a bit in that document is your ability to center your breath. So the more that you're able to get your body to breathe to your center, so that means taking a breath into your belly, the more you will find that you can be willing to experience whatever happens in a moment. Now, the less that you breathe to the center of your body, the more that you'll find you will be unwilling to experience what happens in a moment. Is that making sense to you so far? Great. So these are principles that I was introduced to back in 2006. And these principles, and a lot of them are in that document, some of them we're talking about today, these principles are principles that I've applied in my life that have made it infinitely better than what it was. These principles have brought a far greater degree of happiness and ease into my life. I've been able to get things that I wanted to get, rather than getting stuck in the emotion and getting bogged down with the frustration or the day-to-day activity of being busy and making sure I was active and getting loads of things done. So there's nothing I'm talking about right now that I've not applied and implemented. And there's also nothing I'm talking about right now that is something that I've not worked with hundreds of clients one-on-one over the last 11 years. So please don't think for a second that changing the way you breath or changing the way that you breathe is, that's not going to do much. Please make sure that you give that a bit of time, attention, and inspection. This willingness to experience idea or concept is an emotional concept. Your breath has a huge impact on the way that you feel. Does that make sense? So, having learned what I learned 11 years ago, I made a choice to walk away from the industry that I was in because I wanted to understand everything about the principles that I'm now sharing with you. I wanted to know, how was it that my life changed so quickly in a very, very short space of time? And, what I've learned as a result of that, I got way more than what I bargained for. So the most important thing about these things is that these principles work. Centered breathing and the 5 principles that are in that document. If you haven't got that document, make sure you send a message. We'll send you a copy of it immediately. It's a free download. It's got a lot of very valuable information in it. All right. So if personal freedom is the ability to get what you want, and emotional charge is the thing that gets in the way of you getting what you want, then really what we want to look at is what can we do to stop creating more emotional charge? And then secondly, what do we do in order to remove emotional charge that exists? If you're willing, pop in the chat box right now something where, it might be a topic, an idea, or an area of your life where you feel that you may have a little bit of emotional charge. If you do that, if you're willing to do that, I will make sure that I actually deal with or talk about that as best as I'm able to. There's a couple of questions that have come through from people when we emailed out when you registered for this. I asked you to respond with some questions that you wanted me to talk about today. So I'll come to those in just a second, but the main thing that I want to look at right now is one of the things that emotional charge does is it creates a stained glass window that you view the world through. See, you have experiences in your life, and those experiences, one of the things they do is they teach you survival mechanisms. So you learn how to deal with the experiences you have as you go through your life, particularly from a really young age. And when you're in that young age and you're very moldable, the experiences that you have, many people have great intentions, but often what happens is that even with great intentions, you'll experience something, and if you don't feel safe, or you don't feel secure, or if you feel out of control, or you feel like your ability to be part of is threatened, so there's potential alienation, what happens is that you go into survival mode. You experience that, or we all experience that, as some form of trauma. And as soon as that occurs, what do you think happens to our breath? Yep, breathing goes right up in the chest, and we go, and we're in panic mode. It creates fight, flight, faint, freeze mechanisms. So essentially, what I've just described there is that we go into a place called being unwilling to experience what happens. If we're unwilling to experience it, we've now created charge. We have a memory, which is just a picture. And on that memory, we hang an emotion. And those emotions, if we're unwilling to experience them, charge gets created. And now that charge is like the virus on the file in the computer on your hard drive. So bang, we're now creating with that in life. So that restriction, if I give a real example of how that works, we had a client who was smoking cigarettes, didn't want to be smoking cigarettes, and had been smoking cigarettes for years. Well, when we found the emotional charge that was the thing that was linking them to smoking cigarettes, it was absolutely amazing how much many other areas of that person's life all of a sudden changed. That it was like they were a whole different person. So emotional charge really has far-reaching, it's like it's got tentacles. It goes out and reaches into all sorts of different areas of your life. And in reaching those areas, it places subtle restrictions on you. And again, the word I've used there is the word subtle. If you don't really confront it, you'll miss it. You won't see that it's there. You get so used to living life with it, you get so used to it just being a part of your life, that you're unaware that there's anything untoward. You're unaware that it's actually even there, or even affecting you, or having an impact on your decision making. So we look at the world through this stained glass window that's made up of all of these experiences. So when I spoke earlier about getting on a plane, thinking I'm going to Sydney and landing in Darwin, it's the same principle as if you're standing at the edge of a lake and there's something in the water on the ground, if you reach in with your hand in order to pick up whatever it is, you're going to look and you're going to reach in. And then when your hand goes in the water, all of a sudden your hand's nowhere near the item that you want to pick up, because refraction's occurring. It changes where you think things are and where you think you're going. So when you leave your destination and you go through this stained glass window, instead of going straight across to point B, you end up down at point X. That's one of the impacts that emotional charge has on us. That impacts personal freedom. Personal freedom is the ability to get what you want. And if you're not able to see exactly where it is and see all of the steps to get there, you're not going to be able to get what you want. Now, in life, you have 4 invisible muscles. And those invisible muscles are the muscles that enable you to get what you want. They have a higher priority than your physical muscles or anything about your physical body. The 4 invisible muscles you have are awareness, intention, interest, and lastly is attention. And attention is last because if you think of it this way, the first 3, so awareness, interest, and intention, they direct where you place your attention. So the first 3 direct the 4th one. And the 4th one, that's the only one that's limited. So you only have, let's say, 100 units of attention in each moment of your life. So as you go through life, the more that you are able to intentionally direct where you place your attention, the more you'll be able to get what you want. Makes sense, right? So that's logical. The problem is that emotional charge is not logical. So what happens, if I can talk about it this way, is that emotional charge uses up units of your attention. So in the moment where you're at school and the teacher raps on your desk and asks you a question, in that moment, there's a whole bunch of feelings that you're unwilling to experience, and all your mates are looking at you. A huge amount of your attention is occupied by all of that, by the feelings, by your mates looking at you, and by you efforting to not experience the feelings that are there. Is that a way that I hope that way of talking about it makes sense to you? So however many units of attention that is eating up, that means that you don't have those units available. Now, when emotional charge is created, what will happen is 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months down the road, when you're sitting in maths class, those units of attention are still being used because the charge is there. It's got your attention. That doesn't mean you'll be aware of it, but it will have your attention. It'll be subtle and it'll be sitting in the background. So that reduces your ability to intentionally direct your attention. Does that make sense to you? If not, make sure you pop a message in here. Now, I talked earlier about the amount of personal freedom that you have in life is really going to be down to or directly connected to two things. One is your willingness to experience, which I'm pretty confident we've talked about that to the degree that we have today. So, willingness to experience is something that you choose. We can talk about it in terms of comfort zones. You'd be familiar with the idea of a comfort zone, and then outside your comfort zone is what's known as your learning zone, right? Well, what are the walls of your comfort zone made of? If I answer that for you, the walls of your comfort zone are made up of the things that you're unwilling to experience. So as you nudge the walls of your comfort zone, what you nudge into is, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't like that. It doesn't feel good. It's not comfortable. It's, I'm unwilling to experience that thing. So if you would like to expand your comfort zone, the key to doing that is choose to be more willing to experience something. Shift your willingness to experience. Now, I'm not saying that you'd go from 0 to 100 because that can be pretty scary. But you could effortlessly go from 0 to 10, or you could go from 10 to 15, or you could go from 40 to 60% willing to experience something. You can stick your toe in the water and see how it feels. So your willingness to experience is something that you can choose. It's something that you have a degree of control in. Those 5 topics that are in the free download called How to Reclaim Your Personal Authority, what those will do is assist you to shift your degree of willingness to experience. All right? The second thing is the willingness to confront. And we've given this definition for confront as the willingness to stand and face with ease. Those two things are directly related. So if I'm unwilling to confront something, then that's probably going to mean that there's something in it that I'm unwilling to experience. If I go to confront the reason that there's not enough cash flow coming in the business, well, really what that involves is being willing to experience that maybe I'm doing something wrong. It involves the willingness to experience that I'm going to have a difficult conversation with my salesperson because he's not doing the things that are necessary in order to create that extra cash flow. The two things intermingle. I hope that makes sense to you. All right. I think I'll just take some time right now to handle a couple of the questions that were sent through. So, Jane, thanks for sending through your question. Your question was, I was wondering if meditation plays a part in your toolbox for identifying and working with your triggers. And if so, is there a particular method or mantra that you use or recommend? So I'm going to just talk about that for a second, because I've worked with lots of people who have done a variety of different modalities or approaches to life. I've worked with loads of people who do lots of yoga. I've worked with lots of people who, you know, spend an hour every day meditating, and lots of people who do different sound healing techniques in order to attempt to free themselves of restrictions. And I'm not going to, in any way, shape, or form, attempt to say that those things don't work or that they're not worthwhile. They work. They are workable, right? And the thing for me is that when I talk to those people, what I see and hear is they talk about how relaxed they felt in the meditation this morning. And 3-4 hours later, they were ready to kill somebody because they hadn't had their cup of coffee yet. And, you know, this person at work did this. And so I see that what a lot of people do is they do things, they feel good while they're doing them. But the evidence is that it doesn't necessarily create real permanent long-term change. Now, I know that there's loads of people that get huge amounts out of meditation. I treat each minute of each day as a meditation, if I can talk about it that way. So when you meditate, the skills involved in meditation are center your breath, relax yourself, and one of the ways is attempt to have no thought. Put your attention on the here and now. Feel the bottoms of your feet against the floor, or if you're sitting in a chair, feel your backside against the hardness of the chair. Feel your back leaning up against the pad. There's lots of different ways to meditate. I approach each and every moment with an intention to breathe to my center and be completely present in that moment, and to be willing to experience and to be willing to confront what's really happening in that moment. So in many ways, that is a meditation. I do not have a meditation or a mantra that I use. I have an approach to life. And I've found for myself and for the hundreds of people that I've worked with in the last 11 years, face-to-face, one-on-one, and in group workshops, that is the most workable thing that I've found. It's a day-by-day, moment-by-moment way of approaching life. It's not something you do for an hour a day and then forget about, or you do for an hour a day and then you don't think about it again until the next day when you're in that hour. It's a different approach to life. So I hope that makes sense, and I hope that that is valuable to you. Again, it's not that I feel that meditation doesn't work. I feel it's something that deserves more time. So I've looked at ways that I can turn this into something that I do 24 hours a day or every waking moment. So if I haven't answered your question specifically enough, please make sure you come back to me, okay? Right, another question here, Kat asks, so when I have a moment where I feel like I want to chuck all my toys out of the pram, what do I do? Sometimes it's just so overwhelming. Yeah, I absolutely know the feeling. 11 years ago, I was at a real point of overwhelm myself, where I actually remember a day where I got my sales team, I got them in the field, so they left the office, I'd run my morning meeting, and I got hit with this massive overwhelm to a point where I actually went and hid in the parking lot out the back of my office in West Perth. And I hid in the parking lot because I was crying and I didn't understand the reason I was crying. I had no idea what was wrong with me. I'm a pretty blokey bloke. I like to four-wheel drive. I like to go camping. I love riding motorbikes. I'm a pretty blokey bloke. And at the time, it was not okay for me to feel that way. So there's two things I'll choose to say to you, Kat. The first thing is in the document called How to Reclaim Your Personal Authority, one of the things I talk about there, and I've talked about it today already, is centering your breath and making that a way of life. So for me, the number one thing that I do in any moment where I feel like I want to chuck all my toys out of the pram, and that has a gradient to it from 0 to 10, and it doesn't matter where on that gradient I am in that moment, the very first thing I do is check the way I'm breathing. Because anytime I hit an amount of overwhelm, anytime I hit that wall and, I just want to scream at somebody, I guarantee you every single time that has happened for me, one of the things that's occurring in my life in that moment is I'm shallow breathing. I'm not breathing to my center. I'm not in that moment totally calm. I'm in judgment about something. I'm unwilling to experience something. So center your breath. Now, the next thing is I'm going to give you a system that I use, and I use this myself. I also use this with clients in one-on-one sessions. It's a series of questions that you can ask yourself. Now, there is, in essence, a little bit of I don't like the word, but there's a trick to these questions, and I'll explain that afterwards. So the first question that you're going to ask yourself is this. You're going to ask, well, so what is it that I am unwilling to experience right now? And be honest with yourself. When you ask yourself that question, be honest and answer. You'll know if you're telling yourself a lie or not. So you're going to get answer A, we'll call it. So the next thing to do is you ask question number 2, which is, if I was willing to experience, insert answer A, what would I then experience? And what you're going to get there is answer B. So then you're going to ask question number 3, which is, so if I was willing to experience, insert answer B, what would I then experience? And you're going to get answer C. And then the pattern continues. Now, as you go through that process, it will only work if you're really honest with yourself. And I mentioned before, there's a little bit of a trick to that process. The trick is that in order to answer that question, well, if I was willing to experience, insert your previous answer, what would I then experience? In order to answer that question, it's necessary for you to move to the place of being willing to experience the answer that you gave yourself. So what will happen if I give you an example? So what am I unwilling to experience right now? Oh, it's fear. I'm fearful that somebody watching this webinar or a recording of this webinar is going to think I'm an idiot. All right. So if I was willing to experience fear, what would I then experience? Oh, a little bit of scared. Okay. If I was willing to experience a little bit of scared, what would I then experience? Oh, I'd be okay. Good. If I was willing to experience being okay, what would I then experience? Oh, the joy of running webinar. So that's an example. And what will happen is that you'll work your way up a series of emotions that if you continue working through that process, you will eventually, every time, land at a place called joy or peace or enjoyment or happiness, or because that's really in the nature of what you are. So I hope that's valuable. Happy to type out that process or that system for you. But yeah, that's a really simple way of working your way through a series of emotions to get back to your, I guess I'll call it your core essence. Okay. Good. All right. Now, Joe has asked, so my business is going okay. And at the same time, something's missing. I don't know what it is. We're just not growing our revenues the way I'd like to be. So, yeah, Joe, I can relate to that. Definitely that was me 11 years ago. I'd gone through this up and down roller coaster ride of business. And when things were great, they were really great. But when they weren't, they weren't. So, so the thing I'll choose to say to you, Joe, is this, is that number one, obviously that can be frustrating. So the key with frustration is willingness to experience, and then let's tie in the willingness to confront. So the willingness to confront is going to apply to your situation, because in my life and in my businesses, in every business I've run, if the business is not going the way that I would like it to go, I could, and even still can, come up with loads of reasons that that's not happening. I can look at loads of justifications and excuses, and I can believe lots of lies really easily about what the real problem is. And every single time some aspect of my life has not gone, or my business has not been going the way I want it to, when I'm really, really honest with myself, when I really confront the reality, the real problem is me. The real problem is something about me, something about my decision making, something about my attention to detail, something about an assumption that I made every single time. So the thing I'll recommend to you, Joe, is willingness to confront. Really look at the reality. You know, what did you overlook? What have you not accounted for? What have you missed? What attitude are you using towards your salespeople that is restricting their ability to go and get things done? It's going to be something about you. So that's always the truth for me. You know, we constantly believe our own bullshit, and we tell ourselves some great stories. So confront what's really happening. Look at the numbers. Look at the plan that you've put in place. Look at what you're doing and what you're not doing. Look at what you're doing not enough of, and look at what you're doing too much of, and really confront it. Joe, I hope that that's valuable for you. If anybody has any other questions, guys, please come back to me. If this has been valuable for you, awesome. We will make sure that you get a replay. As I said, this is one of our first webinars that we've run, so bit of a build the ship mid-flight, so to speak. If you have any feedback, or if there's anything that you feel that I could have talked about that you would prefer that I did talk about and I didn't, let me know. And we're going to be constantly looking to improve the quality of these. So thanks so much for tuning in and spending the time with us. If you're watching a replay, please come back to me, let me know. And I hope that everybody has a fantastic rest of the afternoon. We've been going for, just over 50 minutes now. So guys, thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Mike Irving from Advanced Business Abilities, signing off.